Okay, cool.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sam Constance, and I work with University of Chicago's Alumni Career Development team. I'm so happy you could join us for this meeting about meetings. We're looking forward to welcoming our speaker today, Hallie Crawford, to share her insights about hosting a successful virtual meeting. We've got a few short housekeeping tips, and then I will introduce Hallie. So one is, as I quickly mentioned, we encourage you to stay muted throughout the presentation so that we can focus on our speaker. However, this is a meeting and it's not a webinar for a reason. We want you to engage with our speaker and with each other with the content. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, or if you'd like to save them for the end, I encourage you to raise your hand, your virtual hand on Zoom, and we can call on you and you can ask a question throughout the session. The way that you do that, if you're not familiar, on your Zoom control panel at the bottom of the screen, click the reactions button, that little smiley face, and then you'll see a raise hand feature. When you do that, just hang out until Hallie's done with her thought, and then we will be able to call on you and let you jump on screen and unmute yourself and ask your question. I also encourage you to pose any questions in the chat, and we will have a moderated Q&A at the end. And then let's see what else here. We're going to have a few polls during the session, so just be on the lookout for those. It'll be a pop-up box on your screen. And now I don't want to take any more time away from our great speaker today. Let me introduce Hallie. She's a certified career coach, speaker, author, and national career expert with 20 years of experience. Her company, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. And she's regularly featured in the media on Forbes, CNN, Money Magazine, Wall Street Journal, the list goes on and on. She has an undergraduate degree and graduate degrees from Vanderbilt University and U of I. We love an Illinois connection. And with over 1,500 success stories, her team of coaches helps professionals find jobs that make them want to jump out of bed in the morning and go to work. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us. I will turn the floor over to you.
Thanks everyone for being here today. And number one rule of a successful meeting is find a way to keep your dog occupied while the Amazon delivery person is bringing your packages, which just happened a moment ago. So thank you all for your patience if you hear any doggy noises or anything in the background, and really appreciate your time today. Obviously, this topic is so timely and important given what's going on in the world and what will most likely continue to go on. We are having clients tell us that, it runs the gamut from their offices are going to be closed through the rest of this year to they're going to kind of go try half and half this summer, etc. And we also have clients telling us all different things about, from I love working from home and I never want to go back to the office. How do I tell my boss that? To people who are just dying to go back into the office. So it's really important to think about and be as good as we possibly can about, hosting a successful virtual meeting, because we're all feeling so isolated. This is, in some cases, one of our only ways to kind of stay engaged with people. So we're going to talk to people, or talk to you all today, or give you the advice that we're giving our clients about how to host the most successful virtual meeting possible. And there's been lots of great ideas that our clients have been sharing with us, as well as ones that we have been giving them as well. So we'll talk with all of you all about that today. So as Sam said, just really quickly, so we've been coaching and training for just over 20 years now. It'll actually be 21 years in a couple of weeks. I'm actually 48. I know I sound younger than that. Pros and cons for that. We are trying to put a lot of information out there, just by the way, via our blog and LinkedIn on our website, to help people who are in different scenarios, if they've been furloughed or anything else that's going on. So please feel free to visit our website for additional advice, and including, some of the advice we're talking about today to help you all with your different situations, because we absolutely love what we do and we're just trying to help people as much as we possibly can. So here's the deal with just virtual meetings and public speaking in general. Most of us don't really like public speaking that much. I will tell you all that when I do in-person presentations, I still get nervous before them, even though it's been such a long time that I've been conducting not just webinars, but doing in-person workshops as well. So it's totally normal to feel nervous, feel fearful, etc. Like you may not know what you're doing as well as you would like, especially in this virtual meeting setting. Public speaking is one of our top 10 fears. We actually had a client a few weeks ago who is a very seasoned professional and high up within his organization. He's been working there for over 20 years. And he suddenly started to get really anxious prior to and during the virtual meetings he was hosting. And it happened kind of halfway through the pandemic. So just please know, if this is something that is stressful for you, you are absolutely not alone. Even the most seasoned professionals can struggle with this and have a hard time with it for a lot of different reasons. So virtual meetings just kind of add even more stress, I think, to that uncertainty and that fear about public speaking. It's hard kind of being on the spot. And obviously there are pros and cons to virtual meetings, as we have all experienced so far. The cons are there can be more distractions, and people tend to get nervous, understandably, when those distractions happen. It kind of throws you off your pace and your content and your topic. It can seem a little bit more informal. So if you're trying to have a more serious conversation with someone or serious meeting, people can be a little bit more informal, and there's pros and cons to that. We had another client tell us recently that they could kind of tell that one of their coworkers during a meeting was actually like sitting on her bed during the meeting, and that wasn't the most professional kind of vibe to give off. So we always need to be careful about that. The virtual meetings, connecting with others, it's a different way of doing so. And I'm sure all of you, to a certain extent, have experienced this sense of Zoom fatigue, just being tired of being on camera all day long, especially, just like our kids are, with virtual learning. The good things about it is I do think that there are going to be a lot of pros and positives that come out of the changing way that we're working today. We're not going to have to travel as much. It's obviously much more convenient to do virtual meetings. We can include more people more easily, kind of schedule-wise and otherwise. And a couple things that we've been telling our clients too, in order to make your meetings a little bit more engaging, just kind of as a side note of advice right out of the box, is you now have a window into people's homes instead of just having kind of their work persona there and the office space. And so one of the neat things that you can kind of take advantage of as a meeting leader is we've had some clients, put stuff in their background that is a little like a talking point during the course of a meeting that will show their personality and allow people to get to know them better. And when you're talking with other people, or to kind of draw them out a little bit, you may point out or ask something about what's on the wall behind them. It's a way to get to know people more personally than we would have otherwise. And there's really good things about that part of it. One of our clients told us they did kind of like a scavenger hunt during some of their meetings. They would put something on the back wall and see kind of who noticed it first. And we've had other people do, like, either during holiday time, like a holiday happy hour, and they all wore their ugly Christmas sweater, or there's kind of themes that you can do for your virtual meetings to help with that motivation and that connecting with others too. And the other good part is that we can share screens. There's, that use of extra technology that can be really, really helpful with this virtual meeting kind of scenario, if you will. So we wanted to do this first poll to kind of find out from people what your obstacles are, what feels kind of the most, tenuous for you, so to speak, to really effective public speaking virtually. Is it you're not really sure what you need to be saying? And, I'm not sure how to handle like setting the goal of this meeting. When it's virtual, it's a little bit less kind of organic. So you need to be more specific with your goal, your intent, and your agenda. Do you feel like, you lack the confidence in how to do this? Or is it, like we said earlier, that, I just get really nervous presenting virtually, whereas I didn't before? So if you all could complete this poll as a start, part of what we want you to know here is that you're not alone. These obstacles are normal, they're common. You may have a different obstacle, but we want you to first think about, on your list of to-dos after today, what is your most common obstacle? Because you need to tackle that one first. So we've got the results here, Sam. Thank you so much. That's perfect. So unclear direction is one of the big ones, which is interesting. And then nerves, totally get that, and lack of confidence. So we're going to address all of those today. Thank you all for sharing those. And keep in mind, just by the way, like we said that, and I'll move to our agenda here just really quickly, that it is really important, especially in virtual meetings, to not just think about like what the actual agenda is and the content that you would like to cover, but also kind of like the soft results, so to speak, that you want to achieve during the course of your meeting as well. Is it, do you need to motivate everyone? Do you need to inspire them? Do you need them to feel a little bit more comfortable with the project that is being worked on because, you all are working virtually? So don't just think about the actual content and the topics, but also kind of what is the tone and energy of the meeting you would like to achieve as well. Let's look at our agenda for today just really quickly. We're going to talk about how to set up the right settings, so to speak, and environment, the objective and content, your communication style and being confident, and how to work on that a little bit more, and then how to make the best use of and handle technology more effectively too. This session is being recorded, but if anyone would also like a copy of the PowerPoint slides, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to share those with you. You would just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com, and we would be happy to send those over to you if you don't want to feel like you have to frantically, take notes and all of that. And I let Sam know at the beginning, just by the way, too, one of the things working from home is my office is a big sunroom, and the light at this time of year comes through kind of a different way. So if I'm shifting over a little bit, everyone, just so I can stay out of the sun, that's what's going on there. Again, pros and cons of the virtual meetings, right? All right, so let's talk about the setting first. And one of the things that I've had to be working on my end a lot is not just the light that comes into my office, but how to handle lighting and like my glasses, reflecting the screen, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about a few things related to setting. Err on the side of dressing more formally and therefore being more professional than not, kind of giving you the example before of it's not a good idea to sit on your bed, even if you think people can't tell. They probably will be able to tell in some way, shape, or form. So be in a good kind of spot that makes you feel good and organized, but that the lighting is good and everything else. In terms of your attire, it's just not a great idea to have really, really busy patterns on your shirt and that kind of thing that can distract from not just you being on video, but also the content on the slides that you're presenting. And shaving, hair, all of that. I always make sure, because I've got some gray hair and that gets a little bit wonky, that I log in at least 5 minutes in advance of every meeting and check everything, not just the audio, but also video and how my hair is doing and all of that. And we've seen these videos about if you have to hop up and get up. So obviously it's a great idea to have a professional, pants, et cetera, because you just never know. If your dog's barking or something, you may need to hop up. You want to also think about in terms of kind of the setting, and in addition to the location, we also have to make sure, because we've seen this a lot with our clients too, that we're paying attention to our nonverbals. And this is something that I, in particular, have to pay attention to a lot because I'm the kind of person that waves her hands around a lot. I'm very expressive when I'm speaking. And so it's actually better for me to sit a little bit closer to the video screen versus sitting back because I tend to use my hands. Another thing that I will do sometimes, though, to kind of manage that is I'll hold like a pen or something in my hands to keep my hands busy so that it's not waving around. Obviously, number two, phones need to be on silent, and make sure that you check everything in advance because the lighting could have changed since yesterday when you were having your meeting. You want to make sure that the camera angle is correct. Background behind you is clean and professional. we have had clients like who sit way too close to the camera or way too far back. And you need to be kind of in that middle range so that people are feeling like they can kind of connect with you, but you're not right there in your face, or in their face, I should say. So you want to kind of be, check that and make sure that you've got the right spacing and angle, if you will. Um, I would always say too, when you're preparing and thinking about and working on your agenda and your content, obviously you need to make sure that everybody can hear and see you, and double check that. Have them like let you know in the chat box that they can hear you and see everything. We always do that at the beginning of our meetings too, and err on the side of more like formal or professional language, so to speak. I think part of what happens with these virtual meetings, as we said earlier, is we tend to get a little bit more informal and casual. And while on the one hand, that's a good thing and acceptable in some cases, you want to just make sure that you're erring on the side still of being professional, including with the language that you're using and the content that you're presenting. So just be careful about that kind of in terms of the setting and, verbal but nonverbal communication too. And then the last thing I would say too, and we'll get to this next slide here, talking about a little bit more related to setting and etiquette, is it's a really good idea to have a backup plan in case something happens with your existing computer. So I just happen to have an older computer that I can use if something happens to my existing computer. There have been so many times, and I'm sure you all can relate to this, where my computer suddenly decides to update in the middle of a meeting. So it's a great idea before you get started to have another computer, if possible, a laptop set up for the same meeting in the background. So if you need to just switch things over, you can do that easily. And that's basically, one of the best ways to have like a backup plan. You also may want to have not just a Zoom account, but also another type of meeting account that you can use if there are problems with Zoom that day, because that's happened a lot too, that you can just switch over easily. Related to distractions, if you can shut your office door, great. Handle the dog, turn off anything. And just one of the things, if there is a distraction, we talked about being nervous and how when we get distracted, especially virtually, sometimes it's harder to know how to handle that, or it makes us a little bit more nervous and kind of throws us off. So just be prepared for those types of things. And it's really okay, everyone, to just say, hold on 1 second, I apologize, let me go handle that. And not try to either just talk through it, because they may not be able to hear you. And you may just need to step away for a moment and mute yourself. So just be mindful of that we're all in the same boat. Everyone else is having the same kind of scenario and situation too. So it's okay to just deal with what you need to deal with, step away and come back. And also you want to make sure too that you're mindful of your time on virtual meetings. One of the things that we have found, and that we know that some of our clients' organizations are actually implementing, which we think is a great idea, is that early on during the pandemic, companies would just say, okay, we're going to have back-to-back meetings all day long. And we end up sitting behind the computer all day on video camera, and people are just getting wiped out and exhausted because it's a different type of mentality. We don't have that time in between walking to the meeting room or a different office. So I would recommend with your virtual meetings, starting to establish kind of a general rule, so to speak, where they're only going to be 40 or 45 minutes, for example, and they're not going to be back to back, and you've got this break time. You need to not just keep track of your time on the meeting itself so that you make sure you're mindful of everyone's time, but also start to figure out how to stagger your meetings in the right way so you're not just running people into the ground with back-to-back meetings all day. If you have trouble keeping track of time, ask someone else on the team or on the meeting to do that for you and give you those warnings in advance, because that is something that can just really burn people out, obviously, if you're going over time every single time. Don't get lax about going on mute when you need to. Make sure that you're not eating while you're on a meeting. If you have to drink coffee or whatever, okay, that's fine. But also keep in mind too, remember that if you're multitasking and on camera, you've got to, be mindful of that and be careful. And remember too, that when you're sharing your screen, you got to make sure that your tabs, there's nothing private, up there. I like having two screens so that I can only share one screen. It was funny, I went to two screens years ago and I joke that I can never go back. So sometimes I'm kind of looking back and forth when I'm on my virtual meeting, but it's really helpful because then people can't see things that could be private um, on my computer. One of the things that people have told us, which we have experienced ourselves as well, is that you may have people that are a little quieter during the course of your meeting and you feel like you need to draw them out a little bit more. We would recommend, if that's the case, just continue to ask questions of people and remember that they may not be able to or feel as comfortable talking verbally, but they may feel more comfortable talking via chat. So give everyone an option to engage with you, ideally, either verbally or over the chat. People who are more introverted may not have an answer right now, or they may feel more comfortable speaking via chat. So give them the option. And for people, though, who are talkers and tend to overrun meetings, in some cases, it can feel easier to deal with that when you're in person with them because you can do something with your hand or, whatever. So be prepared and ready with all of your meetings. If you've got somebody who's a talker, be prepared in advance to interrupt them, and it's okay to do so and just say, hey, that's a great idea, let's table that. And you could even have kind of like in the chat box a document where you can put like things for tabled items for later, and just have a way or like a little quick blurb, something that you can say to them to kind of interrupt but keep the meeting moving. If you've got a talker too, and maybe they don't respond as well to the interrupting, you may need to check in with them beforehand to make sure everyone has the agenda and remind them that you've got this amount of time, or let them know you can talk a little bit more afterwards, okay? If someone, just by the way, doesn't typically or normally provide talking points or an agenda in advance of meetings that you attend, ask for it in advance and ask them to kind of set that up so that things are a little bit more clear and direct, and it's a little bit easier to kind of manage the time for everyone. So the agenda is critically important, and I would recommend sending that out at least 24 hours in advance, 48 hours if you really want people to be thinking about the content, have time to process it and come up with questions or responses there. And it's also a great idea to have your agenda kind of on the side that you can pull it up each time you're moving to one of the next bullet points, so everyone kind of knows where you are in terms of the agenda and what's coming up next. Let's talk about number two, and this would be, or tip number two, this would be talking about the objective for each meeting and creating the content and how to make that more effective for these virtual meetings. So as we said earlier, just a little bit, you want to determine the objective of your meeting by thinking about, who your audience is, what do they need from you, and what do you need from them during the course of this meeting, and what problem or issue or concern or celebration or thing you need, whatever it is that you need to kind of accomplish during that call, even if it is giving people kudos and kind of motivating them, what's the purpose or objective of the meeting? You want to think too about, again, like we said, not just the tasks and the topics, but do you need to encourage people and inspire them because they're all kind of feeling drained from working virtually, or provide some guidance to them? Do you need to go over new details of a specific project? What's your ideal outcome in terms of hard, kind of tangible action items, but also the soft stuff as well? How do you want people to feel afterwards too? So think about not just your audience, but also what do you want to have achieved at the end of the meeting? And if you need some feedback or help with what that might be, ask one of your coworkers or your supervisor or one of the team members to get their perspective on what they think we need to achieve during the course of this particular meeting. As part of this, when you're developing the content, you want to create an outline, obviously. Keep your main points to 2 or 3 items. It may be a little bit more, but bottom line is I think we always try to shove way too much into our meetings, whether they're in person or virtual, honestly. And you want to make sure that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish within that time. So err on the side of less and have an additional meeting for whatever else needs to happen. Make sure that you use kind of quick blurbs and short sentences on your slides because that can get kind of overwhelming for people. Um, Speak to them in a conversational tone so that they feel comfortable with you and comfortable asking questions. And at the very beginning of your meeting, before you even dive in, like we do on these webinars, always go over the admin and kind of housekeeping items. What do you need to talk about in terms of are we going to take a break? What do we need to accomplish here? But technology wise, letting them know everyone's on mute or not, but this is what we're going to be doing today. And make sure that you follow up at the end of your virtual meeting, obviously, too. You've got your agenda at the beginning, but it's even more important to follow up at the end and close the loop with who's responsible for what and what were the main points that you talked about and wanted to accomplish during the course of that meeting. So we're curious how many people use a specific outline, which would be this technique for every single meeting that they host. Do you all, for our next poll, does everyone write like an outline? I can imagine that sometimes we feel like we don't have time to do that. And so we just kind of launch into things. And I get that, but I think that I'm sure you all can relate that when you do have an outline and have really thought about the outcomes more specifically, the meetings go that much better. And I think that's that much more important in these virtual meetings as well. Because we're not able to just create that environment naturally in person like we normally would. Okay, good. So thanks for sharing the results, Sam. So we've got 58% yes, which is fantastic, and 42% no. Even if it's just for, a few minutes before the meeting, because for whatever reason, you didn't get a chance to create a more formal agenda, we encourage you to carve out the time to at least jot down, a few notes about, okay, this is what we need to accomplish today, because it'll make a huge difference. And as a leader leading the meeting, you need to have your act together and, be able to kind of direct the conversation where you want to. All right, so in terms of creating an outline too, you also want to make sure that your slides are clean and visually appealing. You don't want to have too many bullet points, and it's a great idea to have images to kind of keep people engaged if it's appropriate to do so. You also want to make sure that you kind of practice in advance if you're not as good with PowerPoint or you haven't used it as frequently. It's usually about 1 minute per slide. It's not always that way. It depends on what's going on with that particular slide. But when you're timing your presentation, that's kind of, an average. And it's a great idea, especially for these virtual meetings, to have the agenda and a handout in advance that people can follow along with, because again, you're not there in person, and give them the specific homework, the thinking or the questions you want them to consider or be able to and ready to answer during the course of the meeting. Give them that homework in advance as well. And again, because a lot of us are on these kind of back-to-back meetings, you want to give them enough advance notice so that they can have time to work on those things too. Let's talk about number 3 next, and this would be communication and confidence. And just as a quick reminder as we go, everyone, please feel free, if you have any questions as we progress, feel free to pop those in the chat because I've got that open over here. Happy to answer along the way. And we will have Q&A at the end that'll be moderated too. That will be verbal and chat as well. So in terms of communication, let's take a look at this next slide. So a couple things, I just want to pull all of these up here real quick because that's easier. So in terms of communication, one of the things that I would definitely encourage you all to do, especially because we're all in this crazy situation with COVID, is take a little bit more time than you may have otherwise to just check in with everyone who's on your team and ask them how they're doing. How is their family doing? How are their kids doing? because we're all feeling very isolated, and it's really important as a leader to let people know that, you care about what's going on outside of work, because we're all in this mush of, working from home all the time, where family life, etc., is all around us. So make sure that you do this, whether it's every single meeting, that you check in with people in between meetings as well, but give people a minute, at least, or two, to kind of check in with each other as well, because this is part of the camaraderie that is so enormously missing for so many people, especially those people that are more extroverted, that are dying for, that connection and communication. You want to give them a chance too to kind of, chat with each other and check in a little bit. If there's time to do so, try to put that in there, and allow for that a little bit, so we can all kind of, feel connected again, since we don't, being in person. Make sure that you have a good solid introduction prepared, a comment that you want to make about your situation, a response to how you're doing during this time. You may, to each one of your meetings, want to bring like a funny joke or something, or an anecdote, or have an inspirational quote that you want to share each time. Something that gives us this kind of consistency, but also gives us a little bit of like inspiration and hope and levity, if you will, too. So it's a really good idea, and we've had a lot of people, they will have kind of a fun thing that they'll do at the beginning of each of their meetings, and that kind of gives us a sense of stability, as well as changing the topic and allowing everyone to connect with each other too. The other thing you need to remember with communication virtually too is that there can be that lag time for audio. And so it's a really good idea to make sure that you speak slowly enough and deliberately. We can kind of get away with rambling and talking very quickly a little bit more when we're in person. It's a little bit easier to manage that kind of thing. But over, the internet and virtually, etc., you need to be more mindful of how you're talking. I joke with our clients that it's, speak like you're a newscaster almost. Make sure it's very slow and deliberate. Remember that people are going to talk over each other, and sometimes that's going to happen, and we don't want the people on your meeting to be worried about that and be hesitant to participate because they're concerned about that. So always have a way to handle that. And if people are talking over each other and you're leading the meeting, say, I heard so and so first, let's go with him or her or whatever. Have a way that you will let them know that you'll handle that appropriately, so they're not concerned about it. So when we do, for example, group coaching virtually, we let them know kind of what our ground rules are for our virtual meetings or our group sessions at the beginning. These are our ground rules. If we need to agree to confidentiality, if we need to agree for everyone to be on mute, but then we'll go off mute when needed. But one of the other things is, that people might talk over each other, and we want that to be okay, that you will handle that. Okay. And keep in mind as well, I think sometimes people get a little bit more nervous, or don't want to have like a pause, even more so when it's a virtual meeting. Somehow that might feel a little bit more awkward. But remember that pausing is totally okay. And if someone needs a moment to like think for a second, that's fine. Especially if you are not on video, it may be quiet for a moment and you don't know what's going on. It's okay to say, hey, everyone, just wanted to check in to make sure you were still there. Or are you all thinking? Are you taking notes? Just kind of let me know what's up, because we can't see what's going on with them. It's okay to check in with them, and a pause, nothing wrong with that. Just find out what's going on so that you're managing things more proactively than you would have to otherwise. To help you talk a little bit more slowly and deliberately, just kind of make sure that you're breathing and taking deep breaths, and this will help you with any nerves that you might have as well. In some cases, when people sit back a little bit in their chair, that actually makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. So consider that as a possible way to help with your confidence. And make sure too that you make the meeting like a natural conversation, and incorporate questions along the way to encourage that engagement, if you will. One of the things that I think makes people more nervous, again, virtually, is because whether people are on video with you or not, it's, there's that lack of interaction that makes people feel like I'm just talking like at a computer screen and this feels really weird. So if that's the case for you and that impacts your confidence, we want you to make sure that you incorporate questions and checking in with people along the way. You can even just say, does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions? Do I need to, explain that further? So just incorporate that along the way, because having that engagement and kind of feedback from people will make you feel a little bit better and calmer. In terms of confidence, we already talked about attire. If you get really nervous about virtual meetings, you may want to play a certain, playlist or song in advance of the meeting that gets you pumped up and makes you feel more confident. We've had some clients kind of visualize how they want the meeting to go in advance, and that helps them. Think about the typical obstacles that come up for you and when you do get nervous during a meeting, and have a plan for kind of working around those, whether it's asking for some help or you've got your notes right next to you on your desk or whatever it is. And some people, to enhance their confidence with public speaking, will have an affirmation that they'll say to themselves. It's a great idea, by the way, to boost your confidence, to practice in front of the mirror, just so you kind of see how you're coming across. And if you really feel like confidence is an issue, you may want to record yourself in a couple of virtual meetings and play it back and kind of check out how you're coming across. I do think that we're much harder on ourselves than we need to be, and you probably look better than you think you do, okay? Another thing, obviously, you can do to practice is give your presentation to a close friend. Attend other webinars and other meetings, and even when you're attending to learn about the topic, or you have to be there because it's your boss leading the meeting or whatever it is, don't just listen to the content, but pay attention to how they're leading the meeting and come up with kind of some quick tips and little nuggets that you want to take away from how other people handle things. And there's always great classes out there, in addition to obviously what we're doing today, on LinkedIn Learning and Coursera.org, that can help you in general with public speaking too. So watch what other people do, because that'll give you some good advice and thoughts. Let's talk next about technology. It's a great idea to have slides just for the visual aid, because otherwise people are kind of looking at nothing. And it can either be a PowerPoint deck or a PDF. Again, we talked about camera angle already, but one of the things too, and I don't know if you all, what your situation is work-wise, but because I work with so many different types of organizations and universities, everyone's using all different types of formats, meaning GoToWebinar, Microsoft Teams, all of that. And fortunately, I think all of these have improved enormously during the pandemic. But you always want to make sure that you familiarize yourself with, okay, where's the chat box? Where's the Q&A? Making sure that you're not chatting with everyone if that's not what you're wanting to do. Just go slow, try to stay calm, and so that you're choosing the right places to chat with people, and how you're going to deal with how you're going to handle questions, if it's going to be at the end or along the way. And really familiarize yourself with all of the features in advance, because to be nervous and then have that on top of it, no way, Jose. It's just too many things to do. Great idea, like we said earlier, to log in 30 minutes in advance. If you're really nervous, you got everything set up, okay, and you can go get a glass of water, or at least 10 minutes, whatever it is. We already talked about having a backup option just in case. We do really like using video when possible, but we also know that some people are just sick of that. So decide for each of your meetings, by the way, if it's really important for everyone to be on video, because you need to have a really good interactive conversation with everyone. And for example, if it's kind of a team building type of thing, it's a good idea for everyone to be on video if it's something less formal. But if you feel like your team is getting a little bit burnt out from doing video all the time, you could say, hey, for this meeting, everyone, you can be on video. It's optional. You don't have to. So be clear about that and let them know the preference based on what you want to achieve in the meeting. And ensure, again, as we said earlier, that your background is clean and professional. And obviously, you can do all these cool, funky backgrounds now with like Zoom and stuff too, which is great. We talked a little bit already about visual aids, so I'm not going to go into this in too great a depth, but the more you have things that will help people be engaged, as long as you have time for them in your meetings, pictures, diagrams, everything else, videos, the more people will not just stay on the call, but be engaged and can participate. So as much as possible, like if it's appropriate to use a breakout room during the course of your meeting because you need people to brainstorm things, figure out a way to do that so that you can have and enhance that engagement, okay? And if you do this with the technology, you'll end up feeling much more confident kind of with the content that you've laid out. And you've got some good ways to leverage the technology to, again, keep people engaged and get the kind of conversation going. The good thing that we have found is that most people have gotten really comfortable with all the different types of video technology and meeting technology, et cetera. Before COVID, if I had trouble, I kind of had to figure it out on my end technology wise. And these days, people, if I have an issue with something, they're telling me over chat exactly what I need to do. It's completely different. Just wanted to mention this really quickly, and then we'll start to get to our action items and then start to move to our Q&A too, because I'm sure people have questions. If anyone needs additional advice about anything that we've talked about today, or if you feel like your situation is really unique and you'd like to talk with us a little bit more to get some advice, but also learn about our coaching services, we would be happy to chat with you. It's admin@halliecrawford.com. You can just email us and I'd be happy to talk with you directly about how we can assist you through any of your career goals or needs that you may have. So here's what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like everyone to identify one action step that they will take as a result of being here today. It could be, I need to practice identifying my objective and my goals a little bit more for my meetings. And for example, you might start kind of running your meeting agendas by a coworker or a friend who happens to be good at those kinds of things to see if you can get a little bit better at that. It could be the free strategy session, whatever is best for you. But I'd like you all to take a moment, if you would, to write down one action item for the thing that you think kind of trips you up the most with your virtual meetings. And if we can go ahead and start doing the chat today, Sam, or questions, I should say, that would be fantastic. I've seen people on camera kind of writing down their action items and taking notes, which is great too. But what questions do you all have that we can also answer related to your specific situation in virtual meetings?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is really informative. I know I learned a lot. So a reminder to folks on the line here, there are two ways that you can ask questions here during our final 15 minutes. Click on the reactions button on your Zoom control panel and click raise hand, and we'll call on you as the hands get raised. If you'd like to pipe up and ask Hallie a question directly, otherwise feel free to send out a question in the chat. You can message me directly or you can send it to everybody. I did get one question here to kick us off. What do you think about virtual icebreakers as a way to start the meeting? And if so, do you have any, or if you're on board, do you have any ideas of ones that have been particularly successful?
Yes, so that's a great one. And I actually do really like them because I think that it's kind of like icebreakers happen more naturally when we're in person. You see somebody and, or they're wearing whatever it is, it seems like icebreakers just kind of come up more naturally when we're in person and less so virtually. We kind of all hop on and we're staring at the screen and it's like, okay, we're in class. So I think that they're a very good idea. I think I would do them, if not every single meeting, like almost, every other meeting, like for example, with the same group. And I think there can be different ones. I like sharing like an inspirational quote or something they did, for example, for fun to get out of the house this past week, or, something for fun that they did in the last week. I think thinking about and talking about anything they've learned related to their virtual meetings is good too. I guess what I would say is my preference for the icebreaker is that it would be something more personal versus about work necessarily, because I think that's going to draw people out. So something they did for fun, how are they doing during the pandemic? Have they seen any fun quotes or videos or something like that? I know I've been texting with my close friends all these funny memes and pandemic related things. So it could even be something that you share and bring up, and just kind of post on the screen and people can comment, and, again, moment of levity. Hopefully that answers. Great question.
Thanks. I can attest to that. I know our team Slack channel is full of pandemic memes as well. I've also seen some really funny ones. Like my team, for example, one day did a little like super quick scavenger hunt. We had to get up from our chairs, which was really nice, run to the house, run around our house and try to find something, a picture of our family vacation or like a favorite, I don't know, favorite souvenir from vacation, something, clearly vacation's on my mind, something like that to kind of get you up out of your chair and then have something personal to share with your team. So that was another fun one on my end. And we do have a lot of questions rolling in for you here. Here's a question from Emily. How can we help implement some of these strategies if we are not the meeting lead? I think that's a really great question.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I know that probably the way I presented things kind of made that assumption without necessarily meaning to. So I think you can still kind of have a little bit of an icebreaker, like just by, if you hop on early, for example, or even, kind of at the beginning of the meeting before it starts, just check in. Hey, how is everybody doing? Kind of checking in that way. And you can do so via chat as well. You can ask for, the agenda and just say, hey, could you share with us, what you might feel is our main objective, for example. And I think it's completely acceptable, just by the way, to kind of thinking out loud. If if it's loud in someone else's space, that it's okay to say, oh, hold on, Sam or whoever is leading the meeting, it's a little bit loud. I'm having a hard time hearing. Could we mute everyone? Like, it's more okay to manage those types of things because you need to be present in there. So hopefully that answers. And kind of as we go here, if I think of some more ways to do that, I think it's okay to be more proactive than you might be in person, I guess, is the bottom line. Great question.
I agree. And a great way to position yourself too as a leader on the team, even in an informal way, if you're not necessarily on the formal hierarchy. I've got another question here. Some cultures, apologies, are more private than others. What are your recommendations for enhancing that personal or human interaction without coming across as too invasive and being really, culturally appropriate?
It's a great question. So number one, you don't have to force everyone to do it or require it. So if it's a scavenger hunt or something else, for example, you don't have to say everyone has to do this. You can let it be like whoever would like to participate, we'd love, to share. And you can let people know up front as well if you're not comfortable sharing, or by the way, if you need to be on mute today for the majority of, our time or whatever, then let them know that it's okay. So just to be mindful of it and not require everyone to participate at all times. And if your culture and your organization just tends to be more private overall, you may not want to do an icebreaker, for example, or check in with people in the group as much. You may do like an icebreaker that's a funny anecdote from a recent meeting or something that is more work related. And you may check in with people kind of one-on-one offline about how they're doing instead of doing it in a group. So in some cases, you may want to deal with some things one-on-one instead. That's a great question too. I like it.
Agreed. And I think what's really cool about the virtual meetings that we're a part of is that you have other opportunities to engage that are not just speaking up. Sending a message in the chat is one, having a shared Google Doc that people can contribute to. We can make use of the technologies that are at our disposal to make sure that we're being really inclusive throughout the meeting. And I think that's a big pro here. Here is another question for you, Hallie. Do you have a preference, or do you think there is a universal preference to use a Zoom virtual background or to stick with the view of the room?
I would mix it up a little bit because, again, I think that's part of the engagement. So I like, if for whatever reason, your kids have trashed your office, which happens to me sometimes, and that's a good day to do the, virtual background, I think that's fine. But I would encourage everyone to use your actual background at least periodically, because again, then people feel like they have that window into who you are and, all of that, if you're okay with that, if you're not in one of those more private environments. So I like it. I think it's a great idea, at least every once in a while, but it can look really clean and professional if needed to have, one of those virtual ones. And I think those are completely acceptable and a good conversation point too, actually.
And I will shamelessly plug, I'll drop in the chat here in a bit. We've got some U Chicago virtual backgrounds. So if you want to highlight your maroon pride on your next meeting, I can drop a link to download some of those in the chat. Can I ask, what are your thoughts about what will stick from the amount of virtual meetings that we've been hosting lately, as to, when we go back into what used to be our regular norm? What do you think takeaways will really stick in our business culture from virtual meetings?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think that greater efficiency and kind of getting to the point of things, because we almost do that in a way more naturally when we're virtually, because again, like we said, it's more common to just sit down instead of like chit chatting around the table. So I think things being more efficient, streamlined, that sometimes people will be willing and okay with and actually suggest doing a virtual meeting instead of in person, and be more comfortable with that. And I also think that kind of this, how do I describe it? This feeling of camaraderie that we've all been in this kind of same situation, and just being kinder if we're not as prepared, as we could be, et cetera. Just being more patient with, stuff that goes on in our personal life too. I think that's going to carry forward too. It'd be really interesting to see what else. It's a great question.
I agree. And then I'm going to end with one last question here for you. And I'm also going to pose this to everyone on the line. Can you tell us about the coolest virtual meeting that you have been to in the last almost year that we've been at this, or beyond? And if anyone else has any thoughts that they want to share, it could be a cool meeting or an aspect of a really unique virtual meeting, please drop it in the chat, or again, feel free to raise your hand and contribute as well.
Yeah, so I'll answer. I attended like a mini conference actually that I thought was incredibly well done, because they had it set up for just the right amount of time, for like, it was about 2 or 3 hours total, but they had breaks just like you would like get a quick coffee break, but they interspersed to the breakout rooms, which actually worked enormously well, because usually the leader can kind of have control over, breaking people out. They set people up in advance in pairs. And I just thought it was really well done, because they interspersed a little bit of that like group interaction with everyone, with the breakout rooms, with like larger group breakouts, just 2 people, but also larger ones, kind of mix that up, and also with someone presenting. So the use of technology was just really amazing, and keeping things moving forward really quickly was fantastic too.
I love it. I agree. I mean, I think a lot of the typical webinars or meetings that we might be on tend to be a little bit less engaging. You might be answering emails on this screen while you're listening halfway to the screen, but those meetings where you're really able to get people contributing and in meeting, I think those have been really the most groundbreaking ones for me. Well, Hallie, thank you so much. We're really grateful for your time today. If you have any closing remarks for the group, please feel free to jump in.
Just take deep breaths and know that people are very patient about any, little glitch or any error. That's another thing that we will have learned, is that technology is our friend, but we also just have to be patient with it. And sometimes things happen. So don't let that make you hesitant or afraid to try something new. Just go for it and see how it works out. People will be patient.
I agree. I think we are all, that is one happy takeaway from the last year. We are all a lot more patient with each other, and I hope that will continue forever. So thank you so much. I'm really grateful for you to jump on this hour, sharing your expertise with us. To everyone on the line, I will be following up with a recording of this session, as well as a recap document. I took some notes while Hallie was speaking, and then the handout that Hallie sent us. And then most importantly, I just put a survey in the chat. I would love you to take just 2 minutes out of your afternoon this afternoon to just share your thoughts on this event and your thoughts for any future events that you want to see from UChicago. We want to build our programs based on what you're looking for. So complete the survey. I'd also look forward to sharing the kudos from your survey with our speaker, Hallie. And then to everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.